what do you think is the one thing founders should know how to do before they start a company?
Before starting a company, what founders should have is really know who you're selling to. I mean, like to the point where you've like slept on the couch next to them, like if they were doing it overnight, like really get deep into their world. And I mean, there's been a number of companies that I've talked to and I start saying, okay, tell me about who you're selling to. And sometimes the person that's gonna use the product is different from the person that's gonna buy the product and sign the check. And you have to know both of them. Maybe there's even additional people that need to give a thumbs up for a deal to happen in a B2B sale. And when I start asking questions, really basic questions, like tell me what a good day is for this person. Tell me what a bad day is for this person. Tell me what it takes for this person to get a raise or promoted. Tell me what it takes for this person to get fired. Like the actual details, people don't know them until you have that feeling of just, I know this person like the back of my hand. I don't think you should start making a product for that person.
I'm so thrilled to have you with us today, Alex, on the drafting table. I know I shared with you recently when we caught up a few weeks back, just how much we at Workbench have looked up to you and the whole Datadog team and what you guys have accomplished, obviously as a company, but just like here in the broader New York City ecosystem. So I'm just going to share some stats, like put it all in perspective, right? Obviously, you've grown now into one of the leading observability and security platforms, over $2.6 billion in annual revenue, 6,500 employees globally. Since you were founded in 2010, almost nearly 3,500 customers, which is just like so mind-blowing to think about that scale. And again, in so many ways, we feel really lucky here at Workbench. When we started in 2014, to be watching on the sidelines and watching your growth. And you joined Datadog in 2013 as the first go-to-market hire, 11th overall employee, and over nearly 11 years, you scaled the marketing team to over 200 people and more. We can talk about your background. Obviously, you have a very like technical background. I think that's like really influenced how you've approached marketing. But I'm so curious, when you look back over this like decade plus, like what do you think is the achievement you're most proud of?
I don't know. You know, I think a lot of us felt with Datadog when we were getting started that it was kind of the same way that sculptors, they say, oh, I always saw the sculpture, it's just in the marble, so I'm clearing the marble away. I think that we all thought that Datadog was going to be successful. I do think the scale of the success that it's had, that I don't think we foresaw.
That's so special.
Oh man, I mean, I would say, you know, and this might not be anything specific to marketing tactics or strategy. The company really never felt any different with the size that it got while I was there. So I think that that's something, you know, to definitely be proud of. The success never got to anybody's head.
That's amazing.
Everybody still was the same. You know, we started the company, you know, back when I was interviewing in 2012 to start in 2013, you know, the founders were looking for world domination, for being the category leading product in the category. And that never stopped. That same ambition and that same desire, and also the confidence that we were doing it in a way that was going to get you there was always there, and that never left. And we didn't ever stop doing things without the discipline that had been set up literally from the beginning in everything, and how we ran the company and how we treated employees and how we did go to market and how we did product and how we prioritized features to go in and how we decided to make the next product that we were, you know, once we started to add on a lot of products. The discipline never left. It's still there, I'm sure, even though I've been gone for a couple of months since. And once you get into that, you know, I think it's kind of how people that were like in the army say that even decades later, they'll still wake up at the same time and immediately make their bed. Like they're still in that routine.
Totally.
Like once you get into that disciplined routine, it's really hard to get out. And, you know, I think looking back now that the company has been functioning, you know, since 2010, but really selling for real since maybe late 2012, early 2013, the same general way of doing things and the same vibe and the same attitude, it's still there.
I mean, that's so incredible, right? And I think it's so rare to hear that. Most companies evolve and change, of course, through many chapters, but to your point about the people and the culture and the mission is like so special. Well, thank you so much for being with us at the drafting table. So I always kick off the pod with this one question, which is, you know, what do you think is the one thing founders should know how to do before they start a company? obviously we know founders are always going to learn on the job, but especially given your marketing hat, I'm so curious what your observations would be.
Yeah, I don't know if it's about doing. I think that you should assume you're going to learn how to do a whole lot of stuff that you never knew how to do before. But I think that before starting a company, what founders should have, and most founders I've talked to aren't deep enough, is really, really know who you're selling to. I mean, like to the point where you've like slept on the couch next to them, like if they were doing it overnight, like really, really get deep into their world. And I mean, there's been a number of companies that I've talked to, and I start saying, okay, tell me about who you're selling to. And sometimes the person that's going to use the product is different from the person that's going to buy the product and sign the check. And you have to know both of them. Maybe there's even additional people that need to give a thumbs up for a deal to happen in a B2B sale. And when I start asking questions, really basic questions, like, tell me what a good day is for this person. Tell me what a bad day is for this person. Tell me what it takes for this person to get a raise or promoted. Tell me what it takes for this person to get fired. Like, the actual details, people don't know them. And especially companies that talk to me because they're having a rough time selling or, getting leads. It's like already with our 5-minute conversation on this, you really don't know who you're selling to and what makes them go, what makes them tick. How are you going to make anything appealing for them at an emotional level, to have to push a deal over the line, with a lot of adversity maybe inside of their company. Like if you don't really know these people like the back of your hand, how are you going to be able to do all this stuff? And that isn't any skill, but until you have that feeling of just, I know this person like the back of my hand, I don't think you should start making a product for that person. And you should do more research and learn about them more before getting into it.
Yeah, and that trickles throughout the whole, I mean, you mentioned product, right? But that trickles throughout the whole company. Obviously, sales, how you try to pitch and sell to these customers, how you market to them. And something you brought up already in the beginning is just, again, at the beginning, the team already having that ambition and vision that this is going to be a category-defining company. I'm so curious, do you feel like day zero, the founder's like, I know exactly what we're going to build at Datadog, right? I know the users so well, I know the customers so well, and therefore we have like the next 10-year game plan clearly in our heads. And I ask this because we talk about this a lot at Workbench, whether or not at seed, we should expect founders to have this massive game plan already, right? Is it unfair of us to ask that? Or is that something that along the way, you build your first product, you're like, oh, actually, observability, we can actually like go into security, and then it unlocks other doors. So I'm just so curious about that transition.
I think it's about scoping, and I think it's about keeping things narrow. Like Datadog has 30 products now?
Yeah.
We were a one product company for the first couple of years I was there. And we were focused on being amazing at infrastructure monitoring. That's what we did. We were an infrastructure monitoring company, and specifically for modern environments that were probably using advanced cloud features. And that was it. And again, this goes into sales. And I know that you said you've done a couple of episodes on sales about qualifying your opportunities. Even more important than what you qualify in is probably what you qualify out.
Totally.
So you can really spend your time on the few ops that are real and that are going to turn into business. But I mean, we would routinely get interest in the early days from companies that were using on-premise hardware. And it wasn't that complicated. They're like, we really like the way that your graphs look and this and that. And we just didn't consider them to be serious deals because there were much more basic, much cheaper tools that could do the job for that more basic environment.
Yeah.
And we knew at some point if the deal got big enough, like somebody was going to say, why are we spending this much money on this thing? And, the bells and whistles that we had specifically for more advanced cloud environments, like that kind of customer didn't need that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were very narrow. Our scope in the first couple of years was to do an amazing job of monitoring advanced cloud infrastructure, whether it was in a private cloud that you set up on your own or a public cloud like AWS, which is really the only game in town back in 2013. That was it.
Yeah.
I mean, the scope grew. Once we mastered that narrow subcategory, then we jumped into another subcategory and into another subcategory. And once you have enough subcategories strung together, hey, guess what? You're owning the whole category.
That's right.
And then we jumped into another narrow strand of another category. And we just kept on doing these narrow slices and not getting our eyes up and seeing what was next until we had mastered that narrow slice. So I would say, going back to the hypothetical that you gave about an early seed level team, maybe they shouldn't have this whole picture together, but they should have their one slice that they are going to win really well defined and know what that looks like and how they're going to get there in a reasonable plan.
Yeah.
And that I would definitely expect.
And it goes, I feel like the theme so much of what you've already talked about is discipline, right? And I remember when we spoke on the call, you had already called out the things that really separated you all from the pack. One of those things was, again, the huge amount of discipline, right? And that you were always focused on product, was always focused on the most important things. Talking more about the product, of course, making it really easy to use and set up, right? Which is kind of counterintuitive maybe for like a lot of enterprise software companies at the time.
Well, especially observability companies at the time. I mean, it was, I don't know if the audience will all have used one of these before, but I'm sure you used a BlackBerry pre-iPhone. The thing was terrible. I had one for work for like some company back in the day. I hated using the thing. I only used it if you forced me to. The little keyboard was so hard to use, and the second that you had a touch screen, you can't get this thing out of people's hands.
That's right.
And it was similar with Datadog. Previous products had been so hard to use, you had to take a multi-day training course just to do the basics. Yeah. And one of the design philosophies that Datadog had was this should be as easy to use as LinkedIn or Facebook. You should just spend 5 minutes looking at the buttons and get going, and that was it. And at the time, that was, it sounds really funny to say, but that was a very revolutionary idea.
Right. That was the unlock, right? But being disciplined around that, right? And not getting distracted. And then the last part was really on the go-to-market piece, right? You had shared if we felt comfortable about doing something big to throw the kitchen sink at it. So maybe we can like really dive in there, because clearly like product was being built. The team was being very thoughtful about it. But the thing we say a lot to our technical founders is like, you can build an incredible product, but you also still have to find a way to distribute it. And that part, I think, is the harder part often for founders who might not have ever come from a sales and marketing background. So yeah, maybe you can walk us through the early days of that. Okay, you've got this product. At the time, it was PLG, right? It was...
I mean, it was PLG before that was a term.
PLG before PLG, yeah. I know, a decade before, but anyone could sign up to use it. Could you talk about some of like the learnings there of like, okay, we want to get the product in people's hands, let them use it. Was there some learnings around what to do or and what not to do?
Yeah, so the company that I'd worked at previously, and maybe this is important to know why I felt so comfortable. It's funny because the company I was at before had been in 2 acquisitions. By the time that I was there, I was like a pretty high level person at Dell. I was the virtualization and cloud like product marketing person. So it's a pretty good role.
Yeah.
And I jumped over to run marketing at Datadog, and all these people at Dell were like, why are you doing that? You've got this amazing future at this Fortune 500. Why are you going to be like employee number 11 at this company that's like, working at the time, it was working out of a shared office from some architects.
Yeah.
And going back to that, the opportunity was there.
Yeah. You could see that already.
Right. So, I had that background. I was seeing our existing virtualization customers jump from VMware to AWS, and they were asking us for AWS capabilities. And we didn't have them, so they're like, we're really sorry. So I was trying to find a company making what the customers that were leaving my old product would go to. And the thing that worked really well in that old company was events. We had some great events people. They were very assertive. The product that I worked at previously, just like Datadog, was very visual, and it was very easy to see what was going on. So again, I had a little bit of a cheat code. Yeah. I saw the market shifting. Yeah. I was a technical person by training, and I had seen a similar product with a similar kind of user that I'd been working with a couple of years react really well to a very visual demo. And to the point where they're like, hey, can I play with it? Like at the trade show booth.
Right.
So I actually went into Datadog, going back to kind of like early learnings. During the interview process, one of the things that I negotiated was, I want to go to a trade show. I know that you guys are real lean on budget, but it's going to be a 10-person company to run a booth, even a small booth to the level of volume that I'm going to want. I need the whole company, all 10 people, and I need money for a booth. And we're going to have to get like all the like add-on stuff. Like we're going to need a banner. We're going to need prizes. Like I need X amount of money and the whole company for like a day or two. And that, like, I wasn't going to join without that promise.
What was the founders'
founders.
reaction? Were they on board, or did
they were like, yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, like at the time, the company was very small. It was the two co-founders and the person that became the president is now on the board of the company that were kind of doing the selling.
Yeah.
So
and a few engineers.
And a few engineers that were building the product.
Who are now being roped into the booth.
Right. But all of them were building the product and trying to sell. And they had like 100 customers when I joined. So there was tickets being formed and everybody was jumping in and doing support. And like, they didn't understand what it was going to like, fine, I guess that we'll treat it like an office outing. I'm like, oh.
You're about to be very surprised.
This is not going to be an outing. But if you want to think about that way, sure, that's fine. So, I mean, I came in with the first campaign, and again, with my cheat code. I'd seen this work really well in a similar circumstance with similar people. And there was going to be AWS New York City 2013. That was going to be like 6 weeks or so after I started. So I'm like, I've got 6 weeks to get us trade show ready.
Wow.
So, that's what I spent literally my first 6 weeks at the company on. And that first trade show, running things the way that had worked. And again, the other thing was now was my own gig. So, my mentor, the CMO of the company I worked at before, who's awesome, and I'm still in touch with him, there were things that I thought were really good about his trade show like way of doing things. There was things I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So I doubled down on things that I thought were going to work. Right. But again, I'm like, okay, this is my ball game.
Yeah.
I see how this works. And we got so many. We got like the last 10 by 10 booth in AWS New York City 2013. It was way out there. And we still got so much foot traffic with so many people who stuck around from big names. I mean, some big customers that are still with Datadog originated from AWS New York City 2013
is
with
where
a
it started.
10 by 10 booth with literally like a spray painted banner because it's the only thing that I could get done really quick for a 10 by 10 booth at that time.
That's amazing.
And I mean, the founders, when they took a look at like the fact that we spent one full day and we came back with 400 to 500 great companies to talk to, and some big names that turned really quickly into customers, were like, okay, that's it. Whatever you need for events, you get.
They were bought in from there. So it sounds like when you joined, you did already know pretty well the user, right, and the customer.
I did, but
and
again,
which helped.
That was a cheat code. And
yes,
I will. There is a story there though.
Yeah,
is I came in with this big head of steam, thinking that the people that used AWS were going to be modified VMware admins whose companies had decided to go with a public cloud. And that ended up not being right at all. There was actually a generational shift. I mean, the people that I was selling to at Datadog were probably 10 to 15 years younger than the average age of the people I've been selling to in the VMware ecosystem.
Yeah.
They were looking at different magazines. They were looking at different blogs. They were acting different, talking different. The tech was different. The concerns were different. I do remember within my like 7th or 8th working day, and I was looking at the product and I was shadowing some customer calls. And I'm like, ooh, this is real different.
Yeah.
And that balloon got popped. So actually I did two things in the first couple of weeks. A, I prepped for the trade show, and B, I actually traveled around in person to the customers that we had in New York City and interviewed them and threw everything I knew about the VMware admin out of my head and put myself in the shoes of this new AWS admin and what was going on with them.
That's so amazing.
And I mean, it was different.
Yeah.
Selling to a VMware admin circa 2013 was markedly different than selling to an AWS admin at the same time.
Totally. And getting that level of granularity, right? And even knowing like their ages are a little bit different, like they're just a different maybe generation, it sounds like.
Well, I mean, I was doing in-person interviews. So it was very easy for me to say, hey, why can I go around the back of your desk with you? Why don't you show me all the blogs that you go to on a daily basis?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I made up for the fact. So, again, I had technical training. I was an on-premise guy back in high school and college. Like, I was racking and stacking, storage and stuff like that. So, again, VMware, I already understood VMware. That was one level away. But then AWS was another level away. And honestly, by that time, I've been doing marketing for a couple of years. I hadn't ever touched AWS.
Yeah.
So going back to, kind of the first comments about knowing your user, I had to take a lot of humble pie and say, I don't really know these people. Even though I'm a technologist, even though I've worked with a product that had the same use cases, and even though some of the customers that I used to have would probably be customers for this company.
Right.
I don't actually know this that well.
Yeah.
So
you've gone on the road. You got in those offices, right?
That's right.
And behind the screens. I mean, I think this point about customers is so interesting because so much of the early days of startups is, again, figuring out your ICP, of course, right? And that sounds easier said than done, because your ICP, to your point, could be admins, but what type of admins, right? And you have to go so many layers deep to, I think, especially to your point, really, really focus and be maniacal and surgical about who you can sell into, who you don't sell into. So in those early days, given that the product was, people could sign up and use it, was it predominantly mid-market users? Were you getting any enterprise users then? You then later on, it sounds like, turned on like the enterprise kind of sales motion, right? Mm-hmm. But I'd be curious about the customers that you were able to sign in the early days, and if they were coming from, if you were displacing incumbents or other competitors already.
We ended up doing that. At the time, though, cloud was so new.
Yeah.
And we did get a couple of large Global 2000 companies as customers early on.
Yeah.
But the sale was the same because it was a small line item and it was a small team that was working on some new product or some new technology. And it didn't feel any different than selling to a small startup, like small 50-person startup.
Cool.
That lasted. There was actually a very interesting inflection point that started in 2017 when the enterprises jumped on, like, for real to the cloud.
Interesting. So that was like 4 years later, mm-hmm. right? Like for a while you'd been selling to small
to mid-sized businesses or individual departments inside of bigger companies that acted like a small to mid-sized business.
Yep.
And I mean, it took us by surprise. We always thought that the enterprise would get there, but I mean, I'll never forget, and I've told a fair amount of people this, I think it was 2017. In 2017, we went to reInvent, and reInvent was always kind of the, like, you know, kind of the foreboding moment of what was going to happen in the following year. And in 2017, all the big banks were there. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, they all came to our booth and they're all like, yeah, we're doing this pilot, you know, we're just going to get like a couple of people to try it out. We're going to need some tooling. So like we already got into some of these big enterprise deals, but for like literally like single digits, thousands, like $5,000 or $10,000. I mean, for a big bank, that's nothing.
Right.
The next year in 2018, those people came back. They're like, okay, we're doing Cloud First Initiative. The cloud pilot works so well that every new project needs to be deployed on the cloud, and you have to write a 10-page justification document about why it needs to be not on the cloud if you don't want to use it. And then the next year after that, 2019, the same people came back, and they're like, we're not even cloud first. We are cloud only, and we are migrating all the applications that don't need to be on-premise onto the cloud. We are moving everything onto the cloud unless it has a really good reason. Instead of a 10-page justification doc, now you need to do a 50-page justification doc about why the system should remain on hardware or, you know, virtualized whatever that we have.
Yeah.
And literally in those 3 years, and not the other important thing is that in 2013 in the early 2010s, I mean, people were just kind of like thumbing their nose at AWS. It was like, why would you go for this cloud thing? You don't own it. You can't control it. There's all these security problems. Like this is a nice toy for startups, but it's not going to ever work for the enterprise. Like that was the common knowledge.
Yeah.
It was that this thing was not ready for a Global 2000 or a government, like their actual prod servers. And that perception didn't just change. It went 180 degrees in like 3 years.
And how much of that did you all feel like we need to be doing this education of the market? We should be going to the banks and telling them, hey, cloud is the future, right? Or is that just like honestly a natural evolution of like the market, right?
We weren't averse to it, and we kind of thought we were going to have to do it, but the market came to us way faster.
That's really incredible.
Like, I think if we just kept on kind of chugging along linearly, we would have probably started to do some of that like demand generation, market education.
Yeah.
We didn't have to. We actually had another problem, which is, okay, now we have large, you know, like enterprises that function like old school companies and won't just try the software out. We don't have a sales engineering team that's ready for this. We don't have a sales team that's ready for this. We have like a lawyer. We're going to need like a lawyer for every 10, you know, contracts or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there was this huge amount of growth that had to happen. And we kind of went into it even kicking and screaming where, you know, there was kind of this like, well, we've been doing so well. We've amassed several thousand customers doing this motion. We don't want to like turn down business, but what we've been doing has been working really well. Like, why do we have to change it?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, it took a while to get hit up on the head. What actually happened was So we started to hire enterprise sales teams in, and they all wanted decks. And we had tried to really not have decks and try to teach people to be much more, our salespeople to be much more consultative and ask questions and go through a decision tree and like sound very intelligent and sound like they were like the doctor for what ailed your infrastructure. So it was a really good, sales conversation if you were a small to mid-sized business. But your enterprise people could care less. They wanted the spiel. They wanted the hour-long presentation because they were going to go in a very structured fashion to set up a bake-off. The security team was going to have to sign off on every entrant in the bake-off to make sure that it was going to be a safe thing to try out. They had a requirements document that was very structured, and they needed to have impartiality to go through all the categories in the requirements document. And I'll never forget some of our initial sales teams on the enterprise side were there just getting super irate. I need my deck. I want to be trained on my deck. I need my story. I need my narrative. And we're giving them like slightly up-level training to what we're giving to our small to mid-sized sellers. And they're like, this isn't cutting it. This isn't cutting it. We realized we had a problem when we hired a team in like Japan. I think we hired a team in Korea. And we knew that those 3 teams were not communicating with each other due to the language barrier. And they all had the same complaints. So it wasn't until we got to that point where we're like, okay, maybe we need to change our methodology a little bit here.
That's fascinating that you were pulled into enterprise. Like quite literally, like yanked in by customers who are like, we want to use you, but you of course then have to play by some of the processes. That is enterprise sales, right?
We had some hubris in some of those early deals. We were like, how about you just try it out? And they're like, but we can't. We're like, just try it out. Like, it's really easy. Like, I do remember that there was a fair amount of hubris of like, what we do is so easy. It's so easy. And like these enterprise customers were saying, I don't care that it's easy. If my security team doesn't sign off on it, I'm not going to get fired for installing something, to try it out that could, cause a security incident.
I mean, I'm sure now you're advising so many companies, and I'm laughing too because, Workbench, we started in 2014, and we were really beating the enterprise sales drum for a while. And for a long time, people were not in enterprise sales, especially in New York City at that time. And now, fast forward to 2025, I actually feel like founders I meet, for the most part, actually are very, aware of enterprise sales. They're aware that, you could have, of course, a bottoms-up sale, but, at some point, you likely will still need a top-down sale, et cetera, et cetera. You need a sales force. You need POCs and RFPs and SOC 2s and all that fun stuff. But I think founders have actually gotten much more kind of, aware of it. I'm curious your thoughts.
I think they've gotten too aware of it.
Yeah,
we're going to try enterprise and we're going to try SMB and maybe we'll sprinkle in a little bit of channel. I don't know if you've been hearing that from companies that you've been talking to on your side.
Okay, so a hot take is that they actually are trying to do too much.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, to get good at any one of the things that you do is going to take so much effort, especially as an early stage team. You need to pick one and do it for real and prove it out. And have a success criteria. We expect our conversion rate to be this. We expect, for however many customers we're going to have, we'll get one big ticket deal. Like whatever it is that you have these assumptions that are going to prove that this motion is working. And if you don't hit those benchmarks even after giving it a good 6 months, okay, next. But you can't do them all. You have to pick one.
You really can't do it, especially at the stage we invest in at seed. I mean, you might have 10 people. I mean, 10 is great, right? But you might have maybe one marketing person. Sometimes you don't even.
Usually
right?
Not.
You usually don't, right? So
usually the wrong person too.
I know, it's a whole other topic we get to. But I'm curious, especially when you talk to technical founders who don't have a marketing person yet, and they want to try lots of things. They want to do the blog, they want to do the social, and they want to do events. Where do you generally advise them to I guess, to start? I mean, obviously events for you all was like the haymaker, right? And it sounds like you probably really doubled down on that. Were there other channels that did work well eventually? Were there channels that did not work well for Datadog? And then we can talk about how similar or different it is to today.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that even before that, going back to, if I'm a founder and I haven't really done sales and marketing, what should I do? There's a mathematical formula, and I'm sure that many of the people that you talk to and many of the people listening are technical people. So it's all a formula, which is what is the maximum amount of open opportunities that your company can take on at this moment right now? And if you're really early, you can give an assumption. Like, I expect it to take 20 hours of talk time from someone trying the product out for the first time to giving me, like a signed check. Like, make an assumption. It's funny, I actually had a chat with a CEO about this, I think it was yesterday, and he's spending half of his time selling. So I'm like, great. Of course, you're not working a 40-hour week, but let's assume you are.
Yeah.
That's 20 hours per week times 4 in a month. You have 80 hours of selling time. Would you say 20 hours from beginning to end is about what it takes for you to sign a customer? Yes. Cool. So 80 hours in a month for, 20 hours per person that you win. You can only close at max 4 customers.
That's crazy when you put it like that.
Per month right now. So what you need is 4 super qualified leads.
Yeah.
That are like really interested to try to win. And like they were doing some open source stuff with a lot of people like signing up for stuff. And I said, have you run the stats to figure out of all the signups you have, how many of those are people that are like, I'm in, this works for me. I want to talk sharpen your pencil, let's go. And they hadn't done that analysis. And I'm like, okay, well, you've got the data set, put it in a spreadsheet and try to figure out what your conversion rate is. How many signups for a legitimate, interested party that wants to transact with you. And you can figure out from that how many leads you need to generate of the right kinds of people to get to those qualified leads that want to buy. And you can only do 4 per month right now based on the amount of time you have available. So let's just do some math. Let's say that 1 out of every 5, of these leads is one of those qualified people. 5 times 4, 20. You need a way to get 20 legitimate leads in the door right now. What's an easy way to do that? What's important is you can handle up to 4 transactions per month. Is there enough pipeline right now to fully utilize the CEO for the hours he's willing to give to get those deals done?
Yeah. And I think I love that formula. And I think that is perhaps the best way to explain it, especially to technical founders who are like, look, marketing sounds very scary. It's like a big black box of lots of different channels, but it comes down to this formula and and it's a math formula. You just have to work backwards, right? I think the question is then, of the 20 leads you need to get, where do they come from, right? And I think that's perhaps where founders are like almost, because they're so not sure. They don't know where exactly, especially in the early days. They don't have that data yet. So then they're trying a bunch of different things, right? Obviously for conferences like that you were able to double down there. Were there channels that didn't work for Datadog?
Oh, there's tons of channels. I mean, we tried a lot of stuff out, but the important thing is whenever we tried something out, we knew what we expected success to look like, even in the early going where things were not optimized.
Yeah.
And if something we had no silver linings. There was no, well, we did this experiment, it didn't work, but we learned all this stuff. It's like, no, it failed. That channel is chopped. No more. We're done.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. There were some channels that every year or two were like, oh, we should give that a shot again. And some things I ended up finding out with hindsight, we were just too early.
That's right.
For some of that stuff.
Some of it's just the timing.
Yeah,
right?
it wasn't a bad idea. It just wasn't an idea that was going to work that way. Or then we gained some tidbit of knowledge doing something else. We're like, the reason that thing didn't work is because we didn't do it that way. And we brought it back and we changed but again, we changed the experiment. We're going to try this again with a different idea that we just learned and, with a different success criteria maybe.
I'd love to talk about marketing to developers. That's in itself, I think, a whole episode, right?
Yes.
Because for better or for worse, developers might, may feel like unicorn buyers of sorts. They may or may not want to be marketed to the same way as if you might be marketing to another marketer or salesperson. Mm-hmm. What are your top tips when you're marketing to a developer?
I'd say going back to knowing the developer, knowing what really makes a developer tick. I mean, developers usually get into the game because they like to build stuff. I mean, if you were to go back in time, they're probably a kid like the kid that you'd give a tub of Legos to and they wanted to build something really intricate with Legos. They're really into building cool, novel, challenging stuff. So if you are going to show them how you're going to allow them to build more of the stuff that they want, they're all ears. Or of the stuff that they're going to be able to build, they're going to be able to build it better or faster or bigger or whatever they're trying to optimize, they are in. I mean, I find developers really easy to market to. Again, I have training as one.
Yeah.
So I know, I have that persona in me because I've done that skill set before.
Yeah.
But they're very straightforward. They want to build stuff. They want to build cool stuff. And if you're going to give them the tools to either build more cool stuff or to take away the not cool stuff that they don't want to work with, which is actually that's what Datadog, that is the Datadog pitch.
That is.
You're wasting all your time on bug troubleshooting and trying to find issues and having to use open source tools that are really clunky to try to build the same dashboards. We're going to make that instead of 35 or 40% of your job, we're going to make that like 5% of your job. And that additional 30 or 45% that you get back is going to be just to building stuff. And developers, when they saw that they were opening up so many more hours to work on what they were really passionate for, I mean, they would march up into the CFO and say, sign this, please.
Yeah, exactly. You said something in the very beginning, which I wrote down, just like the emotional element. And I think it's important to remember that, right? And developers have emotions too, right?
They have a lot of emotions.
They have a lot of emotion. They get actually so fired up about stuff. When they're excited,
Yes.
it's like the best feeling ever.
And they won't shut up.
And
They
it's
just
very
won't
genuine.
stop.
It's very
Yes.
genuine, right? And so I like really want to highlight that. The thing that I do think is the reality of being in April of 2025. It is easier than ever to generate content with AI. The content is subpar at best, right? And it's easier than ever to have an SDR, an AI SDR, like try to call a bunch of developers and, like all the things, right?
Yeah, but calling a developer is just like not going to
Terrible.
work really well.
That's not and it's not your persona.
But let's go right back to what they're really into.
Yeah.
They're really into putting on their headphones, plugging in, and building cool stuff. If you're on the phone with them talking about stupid crap they don't want, you're literally taking away from the stuff that they like to do.
Yeah.
That's why they're not going to get the phone and they're going to be like very terse.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to figure out like this is where it depends with what the right campaign should be. And I think that that's something that we've danced around but haven't really jumped into. So maybe
Let's
we
jump into
into
it,
now.
yeah.
I mean, once again, you have to put yourself in the thought process of that and we're talking about developers. It could be, of course, any other kind of persona. But like, what are they doing right now where they encounter the problem that your particular product or service helps them to solve? Like, where are they? What are they doing? And insert yourself in the middle of it right when they're about to lose it because they can't find a solution. You come there as the solution.
Yeah.
Events worked really well for Datadog for a couple of reasons. There were a lot of events where we would find our pure play persona. And we also touched on personas. A lot of personas, or ICPs rather, that I hear from startups or founders I've talked to are so big and broad. I want like a lot of specificity.
So broad.
The Datadog 2013 ICP was an engineer using AWS that has turned on auto scaling. Like
That is
that's
so specific. Yeah.
But if you weren't one of those people, we just kind of showed you the door.
Yeah.
Because if you were one of those people, you would take a look at what we were doing. You're like, I need it now. And we were only going to, try to sell to the people that were that motivated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, the ICP's got to get real narrow. But going back to events in particular, we had a whole calendar of events that had our ICP in droves. So we had access to these people. The Datadog product always looked wonderful. It was colorful. It was easy to see what was going on. It was optimized for big screens. That was, our CEO, Olivier, he wanted it to look good.
Yeah.
And even today, or at least when I left a couple months ago, he would take a screenshot like draft and he would just red mark it up, be like, not easy enough, not colorful enough. Like he would send back stuff all the time if it wasn't that eye-catching.
Yeah.
So I had an eye-catching product. The product had been engineered to be extremely simple to get up and running, 5 minutes. So I had a place with a lot of my people with a product that showed really well, and the access was 5 minutes. It was like they could literally do it while they were at the booth with me.
Yeah, yeah.
If any of those precepts weren't there, the events weren't there, the events were crappy because there'd be tons of different kinds of people floating around, and it would be very hard to find my specific people through the crowds. The product didn't look good. The product required a sales engineer several hours to help you set it up. If any of those things were in place, I don't know that I would have thought events would be the good first place to invest all my chips in.
Totally. It needed a lot of, obviously, those variables to line up, right? For it to make sense, or for it to make sense for that amount of effort that you're putting in, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm curious about like content, right? Was content something like that was ever something you all invested in, right? I'm trying to even think of some of the other channels now.
We did, but we didn't do it for lead generation. And the reason for that was when we actually looked at the stats of conversion rates from our blogs, who read the blog and said, I need that. I'm going to go try it out. They were in basis points. It was like 0.25% of people that were going to go and sign up. So when you worked backwards as to how many people were going to have to go through the blog to make that conversion, rate work, there weren't enough developers in the world to make it a really fruitful channel to invest in just for lead generation. Now, that might be a different, the stats might work totally different for other products or other categories.
Yeah.
But those were the stats that we came up with.
You would still write blogs, but for different reasons.
We wrote blogs because we felt like writing blogs. Yeah. And we had this high level of quality control where we were going to be the authoritative, body on how to use the metrics of a certain technology to figure out what was going on. We were already doing all that research for what went into the product. We might just, kind of polish it up a little bit and make it public as well.
Very cool.
But we never, with the juice would never be worth the squeeze to use blogging alone as a dedicated lead gen channel. Whatever we got was great. It was a nice bonus.
Yeah.
But we never counted on it. Overall, we had a philosophy that the best sales interaction that you were going to have was face-to-face. And if anyone's ever gone to a farmer's market, or if they've tried to buy some sort of high-end good, like if you go to a tailor to get a bespoke suit made, I don't know if you've ever done that.
Yeah.
It's a really nice experience. They sit you down, they give you a gin and tonic or like a coffee.
A cappuccino.
They open up the books of fabrics, and then they show you, pictures of all these celebrities with slightly different lapel styles and this and that. And they find out where you're going to wear the suit, and they make this thing perfect for you. And it's this wonderful consultative approach. A trade show for a tech product gets relatively close to that, or it can if you do it right.
Yeah.
The further away that you go from that back and forth consultative approach, the worse the channel is usually going to work, which means that you have to make up for it with a ton of volume because your conversion rates are going to be worse.
Yeah.
What we found to be the next best thing after an in-person event was actually Google, because you're kind of having a conversation with a computer, but it's still a conversation. So again, our conversion rates from Google were not as good as from live events, but that was like the next best thing.
Oh, fascinating.
And maybe the next best thing after that is partner marketing, where you're talking to a person. It's not your person, and they're not an authority on your product, but you're talking to someone. So like we kind of had concentric circles
That's so
of conversion
interesting.
rates, and it usually went from how far you went from the back and forth question answer consultative approach.
Yeah. We just actually did a whole episode actually on conferences, right? And the word that kept coming up was experience. Like, what is the experience that a person gets when they interact with you and your team, and not just the booth, right? But like the whole shebang. It's so interesting about Google.
I have this problem.
Yeah.
Here's a solution to your problem. Great. Let me click on it. The landing page checks out. I think this will solve my problem. Let me sign up. Getting to those words is hard.
It's really hard. And I was about to ask you if you've worked with founders, because this is a few of our founders where customers might not know to articulate the problem yet because it's not like defined, or it's like not a category known problem yet, right? Which is its own problem, right? Which is like, okay, maybe it's like, is it acute enough if people can't really say it or articulate it? Curious if you
for me, the cheat code is once again sitting down with the customers and not just taking notes, but literally writing down verbatim what's coming out of their mouth. The way that they'll articulate a problem is different from the way with your kind of meta knowledge of it to say what it is. You'll say it really directly if you're like the product manager or the marketer and you're really close to it. You'll say it like you'll cut through all the sayings. This is the problem.
Yeah.
But a lot of customers will say the symptoms of the problem rather than the problem, or like the time that, or like this issue that. And you need that less direct verbiage sometimes for someone else just like to say, oh yeah, just like when that thing happens.
That's, I mean, again, so much of it goes back to customers and hearing how they talk about it, right? Versus how we would like them to talk about it. And also I feel like all the kind of keywords and stuff that we're always trying to like make happen. It's not always how a customer talks about it, right?
Not at all.
Not at all.
And I think as a marketer, until you've had enough exposure to have this kind of construct in your mind of, I know this person will go for this, and you have that gut feeling, you have to throw all of the knowledge out of your head and go as purely as you can off of the customer transcripts to try to get those words out.
Totally. When you all in 2017, right, got pulled into enterprise, it sounds like there was a lot of actually demand that came directly from enterprise, though I'm sure at some point you and your team still had to go out and find enterprise customers, or maybe not for a while.
We didn't for some time because it takes a long time to hire people and to build teams. So to staff up the enterprise selling teams to the point where we needed them to be, and you give them a quarter or two, or maybe even 3 quarters to build up their pipeline and start closing deals, it's almost a year.
Yeah.
I mean, like by the time that you sign someone, let's say that they're going to roll off their job at the end of the quarter, take a month off, and then start. And then you're not going to have real enterprise business coming in for 3 quarters. It's literally a year.
Yeah.
So It took a while to find good people and get them trained, have them join, get them trained up, have them build their pipeline, have them start closing deals. So everything that we did from an enterprise perspective, especially where the deal cycles were longer, had a very long cycle time to get data back.
Yeah.
So that's a good 2 or 3 years of having more demand than we actually had sellers to be able to sit down and spend the time.
I mean, what a crazy, unique kind of like story and timing and convergence, and the reason I ask that is because I'm curious if you feel like building pipeline for enterprise accounts was different, right? Like that chapter was different than the earlier chapter, right?
I think it was about cycle times and expectations and also tactics of how to get that done.
Yeah.
Our cycle times were like 6 weeks for the small to mid-sized business. Literally, in a month and a half from someone signing up for the first time, you had a check, and sometimes a very sizable check. And it was like 2 quarters would be pretty fast for an enterprise deal, for a large enterprise.
2 quarters is really fast.
Yeah, I mean, it was usually 3 to 6 quarters.
Yeah.
Something that I think that we did very well at Datadog that I would counsel other people to make was scale it down. Rather than doing this big MSA for the whole company, let's work on one pilot division.
Yeah.
And keep on making the hurdles that you have to jump smaller and get in there. Because once you have users in the company, you can even start writing case studies from the initial kind of land division that then gets split out to all the other divisions. Like you can do a lot of customer marketing to grow customers once you've got your foot in the door in a place.
Yeah.
And we did do a lot of that to kind of disperse the knowledge of what was going on in our first land division.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
But I mean, you'll get there a lot faster and a lot more in a much more sure fashion if you've got somebody doing something productive in that company, even if it's this huge account and you are at a fraction, like literally single-digit % of what's capable. You're there though already.
Yeah. And then getting to the other parts of the business, to your point, is already much easier, right?
I mean, it's a different tactic, but the percentage chance of you being able to get those other divisions like wrangled in once you've already got a couple divisions that are having success and screaming about how amazing this product is all the time, it gets way, way easier and much more likely to close.
Yeah. Can you share a few other tactics, maybe as you're thinking about that part of the journey, which was like the enterprise, account journey?
I mean, I think field marketing works really well. You take the existing division and they've solved a big problem and make the person that really solved the problem feel like they're going to be maybe presenting what they did to 1 or 2 levels above them, but they're the people that are close to the problem. Take everybody, give everybody an excuse to come in, and there's ways to do it. It doesn't have to be a fancy dinner. Maybe it's going to be a catered breakfast. I mean, honestly, catering breakfast even on a seed budget, you can get something good and it's very doable.
Totally.
So people are going to maybe come in half an hour earlier than they usually do for breakfast. That happens all the time anyways. There's a lot of kind of lunch or breakfast to learn, kind of things.
Yep.
Have people come in a bit earlier than usual. Everyone's going to have a nice breakfast. They're going to sit through a demo of this problem that got solved, so they're going to learn something. And then the people from the company are there to answer any questions. You don't even sell as the person from the company. You're just there to answer questions. And usually there's so much overlap with whatever that initial division did that everybody in the room has 20, 50, 75% of the same stuff going on. The questions just start pouring in, and you as the company, you sometimes even sit back. You only jump in if the person that is presenting can't solve the question.
I mean, that's really at the end of the day, to your point about being authentic and having the customers, one, truly love your product so much so that they can sell for you, right? That's the dream, right? When you can actually sit back and watch the magic happen. And it's such a good reminder about breakfast, right? I mean, I think everyone thinks it has to be a steak dinner, but I think it also has to come down to your persona, right? And whether or not the persona loves a steak dinner or not.
It's true. Some don't.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some events with certain kinds of personas where it was literally we rented a movie theater and brought a keg.
Nice.
And it worked really well.
Nice. That's so awesome. Anything else on tactics? And I mean, I just think it's a reminder to be creative and be open.
I think it depends.
Yeah.
If you know your person really well, you're going to know what tickles them. I think we showed the 1981 version of Tron at one of these movie events. But we knew with the people that we were appealing to, they'd never seen Tron on the big screen. They were not even born, or they were babies when it happened.
Yeah.
They were never going to get the chance again.
Yeah.
It was kind of a cult classic. They wanted to see Tron on the big screen. We knew that they liked craft beer. I mean, Tron on the big screen with some lightning talks and, craft beer from the glitziest brewery in town, like nobody said no to that.
That's so cool.
And,
I love that.
But like it's because we knew that that's what those people wanted. When you know what people need or want that you're trying to sell to, I mean, it's really easy. And I think that the thing is when a founder is saying, man, marketing is hard or man, selling is hard, the question to ask is, do I know who I'm trying to sell to well enough to know what they really want?
Yeah.
If I know what they want or what they need, then it's like I just tell them I'm going to give it to them.
Exactly.
And they say, please, here, what can I sign to get it?
Yeah, I mean, when you put it, and it's such a great reframing, and I think, again, marketing is probably too loaded of a term now, and it probably means too many things to too many people. But when you reframe it like that, just know who your customers are and how you can make their lives better, and have some fun with it too, right? Like I think that's so special and such an important reminder. I mean, the last thing I did want to touch on is competitors, right? I think you all came up in an age of a very unique time. You rode a wave that was very unique. That the reality is like a lot of the existing competitors just could not really compete because they were not on cloud, right? Or if they did, they had to like kind of work backwards to try to catch up. I guess when you think about the landscape today and how many lookalike competitors there are for a lot of companies, one of the things you had said to me on our call was like, at the time, we didn't even think about the noise, right? We just tried to be the best that we can be. How do you think about that for founders today? Do you think that's still true? I
mean, I think it's the inverse of knowing your customer. Know yourself and your product really, really well. I mean, I made the comment earlier about qualifying out was probably more important than qualifying in. And I mentioned what our initial ICP was. An AWS user that was using the elastic scaling functionality inside of AWS. Like, we were custom built for the issues that arose when you turned on that auto-scaling function. Yeah. And you were going to come up with problem A and problem B and problem C, and we had tailor-made capabilities to deal with that and make it easy for you to figure out what was going on and resolve it. And we just kept on going deeper and deeper into that. And a lot of the features and capabilities that we had built to solve that specific problem. So for us, we were always complementary to other companies that were trying to solve the same problem, but it was about positioning. They are super good, but their like sweet spot is on premise. Are you on premise? Yes or no? Well, the reason they're really good on premise is because they do all these things. But to do cloud really well, especially if you're auto-scaling, you need to be doing these things. And we know it because we've worked on it so hard. Ask the other company if they do those things too.
Yeah.
And like we would just literally, most other competitors that would come up wouldn't even make it to the bake-off because we would set the criteria of what you needed for this specific problem so well and people would understand it that no one else had done it or very few other people had done it. And the slate of who we were going to compete with was very small.
Well, I think that 2 points. One, know yourself and your product really well, right? It's such a great reminder. 2 is that you're setting the criteria for their buying process, right? And that's when you really have control, right? When you're defining, hey, this is actually what the problem really is and how we can solve it. But I think the point here really is don't try to do everything, right? Because if you are trying to be the best cloud and on-prem provider, you are going to ultimately lose because you all picked a swim lane and said, this is our swim lane and we're going to do it really, really well. The other players, just ultimately, they could try, but they couldn't really break in. And I think that's the key part is that in the early days, founders never want to turn down a sale, right? It's like every dollar they feel like really counts. But we talk to our founders all the time that, bad deals are terrible deals. Like they're really, really bad, right? It's better to actually have a 0 than to have a bad deal.
That's right.
Those customers can really, really sink you and distract you from lots of things.
I would say the same piece of paper for the design doc, even if it was in someone's head, you can jot it down. It goes to the ICP. It goes to what goes in the product. It goes into the marketing to attract that person. It goes into the criteria to make the sale.
Yeah.
It should be one document because if you're narrow enough and you want it to be the best at solving that problem, you need to understand who feels that problem acutely, how that problem gets solved, how you specifically said we're going to solve this problem better than anyone else.
Yeah.
And then you use that same verbiage to find the people that are acutely suffering from that problem and then explaining to them why you're doing such a good job to solve it.
I love that. Going back to something I did ask earlier, I'm just so curious. When you did eventually move to other products, was that a pull by customers pretty naturally? Was that something like customers like, oh, by the way, you guys should like really go more into the security side of this house, right? It's because like you're already helping us with XYZ parts of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was probably 2 parts customer, 1 part just us and what made sense.
Cool.
I think an interesting thing about Datadog is we never came up with a 10-year plan of all the stuff that we were going to build. It was always incremental. And it was like, hey, the second product that we had was metrics, APM, which there's a company called New Relic that was kind of the big company at the time there. And people were using Datadog and New Relic together, and we had a really strong integration for this use case. It was like people started saying, hey, it's really janky to have to use both of them. Can you just do it? So we knew that there was something there. Once we had those 2 products, then the other product that people were using was Elk Stack or Splunk for logs. They're like, can you just have logs? And we kept on seeing where the edge was. Whenever they said, we're using your product and this other product with your integration together, but it's really janky and there's these other things that we'd like to be able to do that are just impossible. Like, it was always really obvious. What the next product should be was always really obvious.
That's
and
really
with
cool.
Security, I mean, in developers, I hope that, with what schools are teaching now, I mean, nefarious actors have gotten so sophisticated. You have to have a certain amount of sanitation on the developer side with everything that you do. You always have to be thinking about, am I encrypting this? Am I closing off my ports and my endpoints? Like, you always have to be security minded with everything that you build and have a certain amount of just good hygiene. Like with that's how we started getting pulled into security. It's like, hey, you're looking at all my code level stuff and you're looking at all my systems level stuff, and my security team is using your product to find where the issues are. Can you build a little bit more coverage to make this easier to use? Because it's really janky to use your product to get these
in addition to these things. Yeah, very cool. All right. In our last few minutes, is there anything else you would say to very early stage technical founders who are listening to this episode and who are, again, trying to figure out marketing?
Yeah, I think for sales and marketing, I think sales and marketing have gotten a really bad reputation. And there's a lot of people in these go-to-market functions that are kind of snake oil salespeople. And they're kind of like, hey, like, I mean, when you've met one of those, you're like, oh, I don't want to be one of those people, especially if you're like a purist engineer.
Yeah.
But I've met engineers that were amazing at selling. And if you're going to take all this time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, and you're going to start this company and this product because you want to solve this problem, that same enthusiasm that you have to solving the problem, that's the enthusiasm that you need to transmit through your sales and marketing. And you don't have to sound like one of these like really slick salespeople.
Totally.
In fact, that's probably not even going to work very well with like a CTO. But like, I think that every technical co-founder has the ability to do a great job in selling if they understand what that passion is that's brought them to do that. You're just redirecting that passion in a different direction with a bit more structure and maybe using some different terminology, because you've made some in-house terminology and you have to explain that in a way that's going to make sense to someone that's never seen your product before. But there's no reason why any technical co-founder that has enough passion to build a product can't also turn around and not have enough passion to sell it. It's going to take some different skills to identify who is the person that is suffering from this problem and how to identify them and how to explain to them what you do to solve their problem. And that's, I think, what the marketing toolkit gives you. But anybody that has a passion to build a product should also have a passion to sell one very easily.
I couldn't agree more. And having seen a lot of our technical founders sell or just get up on stage, right, at a meetup and talk about what they're building, it is truly electrifying, right? Like, it is, when that is so genuine and so authentic, that's really, whether you call it sales or not, right? Like, that's a part that I think founders should really be able to find and not lose as part of the sales process. Awesome. So if you were to fast forward through this episode, what do you think is the one punchy takeaway? There's been a lot of hot takes. So if you could boil it down to one.
I would say, if you can't answer these questions about the person that you're selling to, what's a good day? What's a bad day? What gets them promoted and what gets them fired?
Yeah.
And maybe as a bonus question, where do they hang out both digitally and in person? If you can't just rattle those answers in very specific detail off the top of your head, you should probably stop what you're doing and hit the books again.
Yeah. Or go to them, right? Like,
that's what I meant by hitting the books.
Hitting the books. Literally go to their office and spend the time there. Awesome. And last question, how can people follow you online?
I'm on Twitter. I'll be honest, I don't post that much. Just Alex Rosemblat. Just have a lot of, advising with different companies.
I love that.
And, I guess I do podcasts from time to time, so it's a good way to get out.
Yes, we're so happy. Thank you so much for being at the drafting table. This is so much fun, Alex.
Thanks for having me.